As introduced already, I'll do a little bit, very brief introduction of Agiatis. So Agiatis Benardou is director of DARIAH EU. And for those of you who don't know what it is, DARIAH EU is the digital infrastructure for the arts and humanities within the European landscape of the ERIC infrastructure. So it's actually legal entities with memberships. Both, as you heard, the island is a member of DARIAH, and in the UK had several cooperating partners in the past, is recently renewed some others, and we're trying to work together more going forward. So Agiatis is one of the directors of DARIAH EU, and is also senior research associate in the digital curation unit, Athena RSC, and postdoctoral fellow at the Department of Informatics at the Athens University of Economics and Business. She holds a PhD in classical archaeology from King's College London, so she's also an alumni like me at King's. So it's my pleasure to introduce her talk. We will have some time for discussion at the end, so please hold your questions. Also for those online, feel free to even start adding questions, and then we'll pick them up later on. So Agiatis, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Arianna. Well, it is an honor and a pleasure to be delivering the keynote here this afternoon, as this is the very building in which quite a few years ago I wrote my PhD thesis as a student of King's College London under the supervision of Professor Cathy Morgan. And just, to break the ice, this is me as a second-year undergraduate student at King's down at the Strand, directing King's College Greek play. Back then, it was the Koiphori. That's 1999 for me. So I spent countless hours up on the third floor of this building at the Institute of Classical Studies, struggling to make sense of 5th century Corinthian archaeological records. My connection with the UK runs deep, not just because I completed my BA, MA, and PhD down at the Strand, but also because several years later, I worked with Professor Lorna Hughes at the Department of Information Studies and Professor Mari Pitok at the Department of Critical Studies, University of Glasgow. It was that latter particular collaboration with Professor Pitok, outside any formal digital humanities research infrastructure boundaries, that brought me to develop and implement the initiative I'm going to be discussing here today. So the project I worked with Professor Pitok and his team on back in 2018 was the Scottish Heritage Partnership, an AHRC funded initiative aiming to address the existing practice and future potential of immersive experiences and technologies in the collections and heritage industry in Scotland. In the context of that project, we visited and assessed visitors' experience in various Scottish sites and museums, and one of them was Bannockburn. In Bannockburn, the site of the 1314 AD battle, considered to be Robert the Bruce's great victory, visitors of the Battle of Bannockburn Visitor Centre enter an interactive battle room, followed by an exquisite and unique immersive heritage experience. Guided by a game master, visitors lead their own sections of either the Scottish or English armies, learn battle strategies, and win or lose the Scottish crown. This multi-award experience relies on a very simple yet clever concept. Visitors are allocated randomly to the Scottish or English armies, regardless of their age, nationality, political orientation. Immersed in the Bannockburn experience, a Scottish nationalist visitor may have to fight and win the battle for the English army. In times of Brexit and amidst talks about a new Scottish independence referendum at the time, this is a true immersion in difficult heritage. Let me briefly discuss the term difficult heritage. Difficult heritage, a term first coined by Professor Sharon MacDonald, represents those, and I quote, histories and pasts that do not easily fit with self-identities of the groups of whose pasts or histories they are part, end quote. The term refers to a historically significant past that remains embodied in sites, buildings, artworks, monuments, and other artifacts, but which is difficult to reconcile with, quote, a positive, self-affirming contemporary identity, end quote. It deals with unsettling histories rather than those heroic or progressive histories with which museums and heritage sites have more traditionally been associated. In reality, and as noted by William Logan and Keir Reeves, quote, most societies have their scars of history resulting from involvement in war and civil unrest, or adherence to belief systems based on intolerance, racial discrimination, or ethnic hostilities. Yet, past violence is often eschewed in favor of narratives that contribute to the creation and maintenance of social and national identities in a more positive, progressive way. Heritage references materiality, intangibleness, and durability over time and across value systems, a scope which underlines the inherent significance of material remains, including built space in the reconstruction of the past. So back to 2018. On the plane back from Glasgow, I was thinking about how to recreate some kind of a Bannockburn experience, not in terms of the digital methods employed per se in Bannockburn, but in terms of using immersion to enable access to and participation in sites of difficult tangible and intangible heritage in Greece. It was clear back then in my mind that the experience should focus on a site in or near Attica, that is the region of Athens, for reasons of logistics, but also of social impact. What else was clear was that I would need to focus on the 1940s. It is by far the most turbulent period in modern Greek history, with plenty of difficult histories to work on. The German occupation, the Greek Civil War, etc. The repercussions of this decade still echo in modern Greek dialogue and social divisions, and see what happened in our national elections a few days ago. So, one of the first things I did was to delve into the IRI portal, to check resources listed under Greece and freshen up my memory of the history of the period in the country. So IRI, the European Holocaust Research Infrastructure, a digital humanities research infrastructure, recently ENERIC too, provided me with access to vast amounts of digitized cultural and historical data, including texts, images, audio, and video material. I leverage these resources to enhance my research and analysis. This is a disclaimer, I'm not an expert in that particular historical period. I'm an ancient historian by training. By tapping into the extensive collections in Greece and beyond, and databases available through IRI, I was able to access a broader range of primary resources easily and quickly. This integrated material provided me with a sufficient overview and facilitated my decision on the site the project would be focusing on, which was to be Block 15 of the Haidari concentration camp. The concentration camp of Haidari is 9 kilometers west of the capital of Athens. This is just a 15-minute drive away from Syntagma Square, which is the right center of Athens, depending, of course, on the traffic. After the outbreak of the Greco-Italian War, it was inaugurated in September 1943 as a concentration camp with a transport of 590 prisoners from other Italian camps in Greece. The Haidari camp was primarily a transit camp for prisoners on their transport to the concentration camps in Germany and Poland, and the same conditions and rules prevailed as are known from all other types of horror during the Nazi regime. On September 10, 1943, after the Italian surrender, the German security service took over the former barracks to concentrate suspects who had been arrested in connection with resistance actions or raids. Haidari also became a transit station for thousands of Jews who were deported to Auschwitz. And this is just a Google Map screen grab, just to show you where Haidari lies. You can see the center of Athens. It's just slightly to the northwest. Block 15 was the building that operated as the place for isolation and torture, used only for male prisoners. An estimated 20 to 25,000 people were imprisoned in Haidari, men and women, prisoners of war, partisans, members and officials of the Communist Party of Greece, Jews, hostages arrested in purges, political leaders, some well-known personalities from the intellectual and cultural life of Greece were also imprisoned in Block 15. In November 1944, the New York Times reported that Haidari was one of the largest Nazi camps in occupied Europe, which shows that the camp had achieved dubious fame well beyond the Greek border. In a nutshell, despite the fact that the German occupation in Greece, which lasted from 1941 to 1944, influenced public debates and inspired artistic displays and performances, the sites of memory of the Second World War remain invisible. The idea behind the project that I had in mind was to create impact on many different levels, focusing on Block 15 of the Haidari concentration camp as a use case for difficult heritage and immersion, enhancing understanding of and engagement in the functions of the building and the historical context, renewing cultural identity of the region of Athens, fostering civic participation of diverse socio-cultural groups. The project itself, a research and development one, was to be hosted by the Department of Informatics, Athens University of Economics and Business, in which I'm a postdoctoral and teaching fellow. Once the site and its tangible and intangible histories had been selected, we built an interdisciplinary team. And this is a team. Standing right in front of Block 15, the only person missing is our then principal investigator, Professor Panos Konstantopoulos. We secured funding, very luckily so, from the Greek-German Fund for the Future, that is the Foreign Office of the Federal Republic of Germany, and the Greek Ministry of Culture and Sports. And we collectively secured all the necessary licenses and letters of support, such as from the municipality of Haidari, the Central Board of Jewish Communities in Greece, also known as KIS, and the Jewish Community of Athens. So what is the Block 15 project about? Through an original interactive scenario based on primary and multimedia archival resources and with the employment of digital storytelling, the immersive virtual reality experience does not only bring back to life the actual monument that is Block 15, but also functions as a reminder of the horrors and torture inflicted by the Nazis on prisoners in an attempt to reintroduce a historically and politically contested site to heterogeneous audiences. And what makes Haidari and Block 15 difficult to process for digital narrative and 3D visualization? As part of a currently operational military facility, now the Haidari concentration camp carried on operating and still is as an active army camp now in the outskirts of Athens. Block 15 and the surrounding spaces associated with the production narrative are not open to the public. So basically you cannot visit it. As such, special permits apply to visit the site, and most digital content captured cannot be directly published or be part of a digital production. As you can imagine, both facts significantly hindered our work and limited the digitized visual resources we could introduce to the production. I'm not really sure I'm doing well with the slides. We'll see. I think I'm okay. Perhaps our biggest challenge has been that for the production of a predominantly visual experience, most resources were either recorded testimonies of captives or scattered and heterogeneous non-visual data. That is, rough sketches, Red Cross registry entries, those kinds of things. It was basically written material. Coupled with the extensive renovation of the military camp and the Block 15 building due to the change of function of the spaces, this left us with a little hard evidence to work with for the visualization of the site during the reference period. Now, let me point out here that while the Haidari camp is still in operation as an army camp in Greece, Block 15 was proclaimed to be a monument, as we call them, a cultural monument in Greece in 1984. So since then, it's been sitting or standing in the context of the army camp as a monument. So it's a very complex situation there. So they did renovate it, and it's, it's nice and, white on the outside, but, you cannot really visit it. Although basic structural information remains mostly intact, particularly for the Block 15 building, interior details such as electric cabling, as well as the function of particular rooms and the appearance of other utility buildings now demolished can only be extrapolated from similar military camps of this era. And I mean from outside Greece. So difficult heritage is difficult to grasp, it's difficult to manage, to curate and communicate. And this was something we as team faced from the very early stages of the project, not least because it commenced in 2020 and we all remember what that means. We all know that in the middle of lockdowns, you cannot really go around visiting sites, just to get the data you need to create a VR production, especially in an active army camp. DHRIs, and in this case, DARIAH, proved to be a crucial platform for interaction and exchange of expertise. I see DARIAH as a very bottom-up research infrastructure. And it may sound funny saying this from the director's point of view, but this is what I keep telling my colleagues. And I think communities and people are the basic pillar. It's a grassroots endeavor, DARIAH. And therefore, DARIAH working groups, which are joint activities by self-organized groups, were indeed very useful in helping us discuss and contextualize the work within Block 15. And I was looking at your community groups, interest groups, Ariana, just before. They're very similar to DARIAH working groups with two great differences, which actually are interesting to discuss at some point. One is their term time. Your CIGs are 18-month endeavors, while working groups can carry on for as long as they want. And there are funding opportunities for our working groups to get together and work together. So back to the working groups. For example, our interactions and ad hoc conversations with the digital practices for the study of urban heritage, very difficult to pronounce, UDGIS working group, which focuses on the study of digital methods and good practices of heritage and urban change, impact of urban development on cultural heritage, the identity of the city and the role of civil society proved to be extremely valuable. And as our Cypriot, Italian, Spanish colleagues discuss the attribution of cultural values to build heritage towards inclusive, innovative, and reflective societies, these help us to conceptualize the framework of our own project. So this was a good starting point and a reminder that DARIAH's social and community aspect is indeed very strong. We wanted to make sure we were not developing a project in a silo. The first set of activities in the Block 15 project revolved around archival and historical research, led by our colleague, an expert on modern Greek history, Anna Maria Drumbouki. She's now based in Munich University. And a site visit, a one and only opportunity to measure and photograph the building to the extent that photographs were allowed and we were not chased around by army officials telling us, to just not use our mobile phones or cameras. I mean, what were we there for? Again, Anna Maria and the team used the e-reporting to access, reuse, and curate resources from various archives in Greece and beyond. And I feel I need to mention all those archives. It's the Bundesarchiv in Berlin, the Historical Archive of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Athens, and I can assure you it's very difficult to get your hands on that material. The Contemporary Social History Archives, we call them ASCII in Greece, the Hellenic Red Cross, the Archive of the Jewish Museum in Greece, the Archive of the Athens Municipality Registry Office, and the Visual History Archive, which was Steven Spielberg's initial effort to attempt to collect oral testimonies from survivors while he was building the Schindler's List film. And also Memories of Occupation in Greece, a project preserving the memory of Greek contemporary witnesses of the German occupation of Greece under the Nazis. Their accounts were recorded, researched, and made available on an online platform. This was an excellent initiative. Once the archival and historical research had gathered all necessary information around the life of, in, and around Block 15, came the turn of the development of the interactive scenario. That would serve as the backbone of the VR production. This is effectively a task of translating research data into digital storytelling. In terms of narrative, script, and interaction scenario, there were two major limiting factors. The user point of view, that is, who is the user, and the exact time frame of the scenario. The first was actually very problematic, since the identity of the user's avatar directly affects the clearance to access paths of the camp, one's ability to freely explore the site and the available interaction. So you can imagine if you're a prisoner in a Nazi camp, you can't just roam around and look at buildings, and you're not allowed to do that. And at the same time, we did not want to just develop just a 3D guided tour. We did want to have a scenario as a backbone. The time frame had to be carefully chosen according to the historical information so as to maximize the convergence of events impacting or referenced by the scenario without artificially stretching the virtual reality experience time or altering factual information for the sake of the narrative. So on the one hand, we had to stick to the 12 to 14 minutes production. Now we're not sticking to that. It's going to be a longer production eventually, but also we wanted to remain as true to the sources as possible. We didn't want to just create some fictional kind of a scenario. As the team was extremely interdisciplinary, all members needed to be on the same page as to what constitutes immersion and what really are the affordances of digital storytelling. To this effect, we made sure we all shared the same VR experiences. So there was this company coming at the Athens University of Economics and Business, bringing headsets. So we all had a VR experience and we discussed about it, their affordances, who got dizzy, who got nauseated, and so on and so forth. But we also studied the interdisciplinary course on storytelling for digital narratives and blended spaces available on DARIAH Teach, which was a platform for open educational resources for digital arts and humanities educators and students, initially funded by an Erasmus Plus strategic partnership through the DARIAH campus. This interdisciplinary course addresses how principles of textual, visual, oral, and place-based storytelling challenge and enhance the conceptualization, construction, and experience of digitally created worlds connecting to real-world places, locations, and landscapes. It's divided into 5 units, but we only focused on 3 of them: telling stories from the analog to the digital, digital heritage, design interaction, and evaluation, and audio narrative. So we just picked 3 because it's easy to do, and this is what DARIAH Campus encourages you to do. Just pick what you need and study. Let me take some minutes to say a few words about DARIAH Campus, which I mentioned briefly earlier during Orla's session. I wanted to discuss briefly DARIAH Campus, as training and capacity building is one of the pillars of our DARIAH strategic plan. It's a major pillar. DARIAH Campus is a discovery framework and a hosting platform for DARIAH and DARIAH affiliated offerings in training and education, serving effectively everyone working within and across the humanities from all levels of digital literacy. So we're not focusing just on people who are very literate in the digital way. The aim of the DARIAH Campus is to widen access to open, inclusive, high-quality learning materials that aim to enhance creativity, skills, technology, and knowledge in the digitally enabled arts and humanities. So not in the digital humanities, but the digitally enabled arts and humanities. There are multiple ways anyone can propose a contribution. We are open to non-affiliated entities, as well to our national nodes, of course. It brings together external resources, as well as hosting original training resources that can be reused by academics in the community to create bespoke training. DARIAH Campus also offers Pathfinders, a curated discussion of resources related to a specific area, and the Captured Events tool, sustaining training events for future use. In case you would be interested in proposing a contribution, please feel free to contact me later, and I see that there may be interest. Helena Barnes' discussion brought this up, perhaps Anne Gau's comment just before, and I'm sure the association will be able to facilitate this. So to go back to block 15, The Digital Narratives and Blended Spaces module, which was an external resource from DARIAH Teach, as I explained, and available to discover via the DARIAH campus, proved to be extremely useful for the team, who were ready to collaboratively work on the scenario development. Now, let me just point out here that our team was extremely interdisciplinary. We had historians, we still have historians on board, of course, developers, designers. The sketches you have been seeing were created by our illustrator. He's quite a famous comics illustrator and, as of late, cinema director, Yorgos Goussis, but also writers and many different disciplines. So under the leadership of Yannis Ragos, a well-established writer in Greece, and Yorgos Goussis, scriptwriter and illustrator, whose work you have been watching all along. So these were the two people that actually worked on the scenario, were the translators between the data and the bridges between the data and the production. The interactive scenario of the virtual reality production is developed as a dramaturgical narrative, which, however, is based on a thorough historical research and is faithful to historical sources and events in accordance with their actual timeline. So we have not deviated at all. The narrative revolves around the experience of a prisoner in Block 15 of the Haidari concentration camp during a 24-hour period, the morning of the 9th to the morning of the 10th of August, 1944. The user or visitor, I'm open for discussion later, of the VR experience is the protagonist of the narrative in the role of a prisoner who has just been transferred to the Haidari concentration camp from the blockade of Vyronas and is appointed to the kitchens. Thus, the eyes of the user and the newly arrived prisoner coincide, initially virginal and unsuspecting, then gradually becoming aware of the grim reality of the camp. Soon enough, the user prisoner takes on a mission to deliver a note from the women's block to another prisoner in solitary confinement within Block 15. With the action unfolding in 10 scenes taking place in different parts of the Haidari concentration camp and Block 15, the men's detention block, the courtyard, the kitchens, the camp gate, which is this place, the women's block, cells and chamber 18 of Block 15, the user interacts with other prisoners as well as with German officers and soldiers and becomes witness of events significant to camp life. Among them, the morning roll call, the selection of the 50 prisoners to be executed in Mandra, Attica, on the 9th of August, 1944. This is an iconic event in modern Greek history. The strenuous efforts of the prisoners' mothers to see them from afar. The forced labor and tortures of prisoners carrying heavy stones in the courtyard under the whip of German soldiers. The distribution of food and other essentials by the International Committee of the Red Cross, the torturous arrival of the Jews of Rhodes, the ration distribution in the chambers and everyday life of prisoners, the arrival of hundreds of prisoners from the blockade of Durvuti and Katsipoti, escorted by the security battalions, the isolation and the horrors afflicted on prisoners in Block 15. Featured in the script as characters are also actual persons, such as the prisoners Eleni Georgada, who is, I have to say, still alive in a very old age. She's the only survivor of that horror right now, the only living survivor, sorry. And Antonis Floudis, the camp doctor, but also German military personnel, such as the camp commander Fischer, the interpreter Wassenhofen, and the guards Kovac and Sunerich. The user or visitor can choose to interact with people, that's a testimony, and objects, that's object interaction, and thus obtain additional information on certain aspects of camp life. The narrative is preceded and followed by a brief presentation of additional historical data about the Haidari concentration camp in Block 15, enriching the provided information and at the same time strengthening the user experience. Throughout the course of the scenario development and the initial stages of the VR development, the project and the team benefited greatly by collaborative and networking opportunities fostered by DARIAH. A talk I was invited to deliver before I got appointed director over a year ago, or almost a year ago, in the context of the DARIAH Friday Frontiers initiative, which is led by my great colleague Vicky Garnett at the DARIAH Central Office, enabled the team to establish connections with experts and scholars in related domains and exchange interdisciplinary insights. Again, we made the conscious decision not to work in a silo. So DARIAH Friday Frontiers launched in 2020, and it is a series of in-house webinars for the DARIAH community. As part of its strategic plan, DARIAH is committed to establishing itself as a learning organization. So the in-house webinar series offers presentations and lectures on a variety of topics relevant to issues in the digital humanities or the digitally enabled arts and humanities. I would like to stress here that recordings of the Friday Frontier talks are available through DARIAH Campus. You are all welcome to watch them. Now, a few words about the VR production itself, developed by my fantastic colleagues, Giorgos Papaioannou and Dimitris Christopoulos at the Athens University of Economics and Business. We have opted for a particular approach for our VR production and therefore focused the scenario accordingly, distancing the user from face-to-face interactions and dialogues, capturing wider field actions and focusing on the user's ability to move more freely, you understand how freely they moved, and interact with the environment instead. The VR production is based on the Unity game engine, so that's no surprises there. Particular attention has been given to atmospheric lighting to establish the desired mood. Initially, we thought, let's make it black and white, but no, we decided to take the more difficult road with working with the lighting. A fast-paced yet green scenario and optional interaction opportunities that reveal additional historical information and open up new dialogues. That said, the dramatic potential of a cinematographic 360 production was compelling enough to motivate us for a separate side project that would be more passive in terms of interactivity, yet more emotionally intense. So we can have close-ups to faces. If you have actors, it's always easier to do. Conversing with and following the cook around the camp to enter block 15, we see through the assistant's eyes, your eyes, the user's eyes, various parts of the camp, including the kitchen rooms, part of the courtyard in front cell blocks, where the roll call used to take place, and of course the block 15 building and its interior. For the 3D modeling of the latter, the original building still stands, albeit renovated and modified, as I said. Since plans for the historical building do not exist, and any sketches were scarce and unreliable, so we have the sketches of the camp doctor, but you understand how these look. We had to take on-site measurements and photos from which we eventually reconstructed enough structural and functional information to reconstruct the spaces visited in the production. No digitally captured data could be used directly, as they would A, clash with military regulations, and B, not reflect the function and conditions of the building in the time frame of interest. Instead, all models and textures were created by hand, respecting the measurements and photographic evidence were available. For the interior, although most elements are preserved, ground floor general structure, some doors, window grills, that sort, we had to use reference from the other similar era Nazi concentration camps and military facilities for certain details that would not have survived the repeated renovation. Like, for example, electrical systems, wall and floor colors and markings. These we had to, just imagine. The production is going to be completed and available on an open, free-to-use policy, and this was a demand of our officers at the German embassy in Greece. Before I eventually stop and let you have a look at our demo, unfortunately, I could not carry, the headsets in my hand luggage, but then, how many of them could I have carried anyway? I would like to mention that just over a month ago, I gave an invited talk at the annual CLADA conference in Sofia, Bulgaria. And this is my favorite part of the presentation. It's me giving a talk about Block 15 and showing you a picture of me giving a talk about Block 15 in Bulgaria, okay? I couldn't find another one. CLADA stands for Clarin and DARIAH. They are one of the newest national full members of the infrastructure, and I was telling somebody this afternoon that they are perhaps one of the most active DARIAH partners. And I discussed the details and intricacies of the Block 15 project. After I finished, a senior researcher from the Bulgarian Academy of Sciences approached me and told me that my talk had inspired him and his colleagues to develop an immersive production on a Bulgarian site of difficult heritage, a communist concentration camp. And this gave me an idea. Building on the Block 15 project and its distinct series of processes, our team will be developing a replicable workflow, offering it to DARIAH and making it available through the Social Sciences and Humanities Open Cluster Marketplace, the SHOC Marketplace, as you may have heard it. The SHOC Marketplace is a discovery portal which pools and contextualizes resources for social sciences and humanities research communities, tools, services, training materials, datasets, publications, and workflows. Resources can also be presented in research workflows where a step-by-step approach is followed and resources are associated to each stage of the work to describe a specific methodology. Three main reasons for creating a workflow. One, to reflect on the methodologies in a research project and contribute to fostering best practices in a given community. Second, to get peer review, trigger feedback, and gain visibility. And three, to share methodological aspects of a project in another form than the usual blog or article. These are quite outdated methods, and thus to offer a new way to disseminate research work. So a Block 15 workflow it is, and this will fit perfectly both with DARIAH's strategic plan, in which workflows are central, as well as with a theme for the annual event in 2024, which will take place in Lisbon, and in which you're all, of course, all invited. And the theme is, guess what? Workflows. Speaking of the networking and expertise exchange within the context of research infrastructures, I would like to mention another opportunity offered to me by ERI this time, the European Holocaust Research Infrastructure, who ran a workshop at Yad Vashem in Jerusalem last November. The workshop was themed Challenges in Presenting Holocaust Resources in the Digital Age, and it focused around initiatives in accessibility to Holocaust archival resources and new ways of presenting digital archival content. As you may infer, there were German, Dutch, Israeli, French, and other initiatives presented, and I got to present the affordances and limitations of developing interactive digital storytelling based on Holocaust archival resources. As you can imagine, the discussions which followed were quite heated. Were we gamifying or trivializing the Holocaust experience? What were the ethics around it? It was within this community built for years within the European Holocaust Research Infrastructure that I was able to discuss issues that were burning within the Block 15 team as well. Trivialization and insensitivity, distortion of historical facts, lack of empathy and understanding, the ethical responsibility to historical accuracy, issues of misinformation or denialism, informed consent and respect for survivors, as well as commercialization. Could there be such discussions outside the context of a research infrastructure? Sure, but that one was different. Multiplicity of discipline perspectives and cultural backgrounds, high level of expertise, a workshop that was designed for this exact purpose by a research infrastructure. I would now like to turn to one of the flagships of our DARIAH strategic plan, another one of our flagships, collections as data. As I feel with both my DARIAH director and Block 15 coordinator hats on, it is worth mentioning. In late 2020, my DARIAH colleagues, co-directors Toma Tasovac, Sally Chambers, and our former open science officer currently working in COARA, the Coalition for Advancing Research Assessment, Elspeth Chifra, released a position paper on cultural heritage data from a humanities research perspective. In this position paper, available through HAL, so it's openly available for you to see, Tasovac, Chambers, and Chifra explore the challenges faced by Europe in digitizing its cultural heritage. With a significant portion of Europe's cultural heritage yet to be digitized and existing digitized material becoming outdated, there is a need to rethink digitization strategies. The paper emphasizes the importance of digital cultural heritage for humanities research, and advocates for collaboration between cultural heritage institutions, the humanities research community, and data scientists. It suggests implementing sustainable data curation workflows and making research-driven digital cultural heritage datasets accessible as fair humanities research datasets, that is, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. The paper also highlights the role of Europeana, the importance of cultural heritage as open data, the need for monitoring digitization efforts, and the potential of advanced technologies such as artificial intelligence for analyzing digital cultural heritage. This year's annual event, held in Budapest a few weeks ago, focused on the proclamation that cultural heritage data is humanities research data, and sought to explore what this means in practice. What does it mean for cultural heritage institutions to provide access to their collections as data? Do we need to think of different workflows for digitized and born digital datasets? Can we think of a humanities research data continuum? And what does it mean for small-scale projects like Block 15 and so many more across Europe to be carrying out data-driven research by curating and reinterpreting cultural heritage collections? In other words, we should not work in silos, and infrastructures such as DARIAH ensure we do not. The Block 15 project is now entering its final phase, in which we will be developing the remaining scenes of the production scenario. Building on the Scottish Heritage Partnership Visitor Experience Assessment with which I started this talk, that's Professor Mari Pittock's project, my colleagues and I designed a user evaluation study to gain insights on our VR application at an earlier stage of the production development process, getting initial constructive feedback by users on design, usability, content, and user experience. The results of this evaluation were later used by the design team to validate decisions and make the necessary adjustments to improve the final production. For this purpose, we chose to conduct targeted research with small but carefully selected sample to gain a deep understanding and nuanced insight. A mixed methods approach was unsurprisingly followed to collect both quantitative and qualitative data. Evidence-based information was collected via an online questionnaire and semi-structured interviews. The questions asked aim to capture physical reactions, feelings, learning outcomes, interaction efficiency, technical aspects, design, aesthetics, and overall user experience. The scope of interviews was A, to capture first impressions immediately after each session, and B, to elaborate on what might need improvement according to the participants. I'm not going to go into too much detail on those results, but I'm happy to discuss them later. They were quite diverse and interesting. So I will close by saying that Block 15 is a small-scale project that sprang out of a British-Greek collaboration, or Scottish-Greek collaboration, aiming at making difficult heritage in Greece accessible, open, and inclusive. In this project, everything was difficult, not just the heritage. Access to and interpretation of data, access to the site, developing an interactive data-driven scenario which would inform and educate while remaining true to the sources, designing a VR production which would do the building and the surrounding areas justice. This is the first production of its kind in Greece and one of the very few in Europe, and it commenced during hard COVID lockdowns. We did not want to build a project in silo. DHRIs such as DARIAH proved to facilitate training in capacity building, networking, and visibility. They proved to foster access to resources and good practices, to create impact, and most importantly, to make us feel less of an isolated team in the European South, carrying out cutting-edge but risky DH research, and more of a part of a broad community of same-minded people struggling the same issues every day. This was priceless. Now, let me move to the demo.
Verdammt nochmal, die singen wieder. Ruhe, sofort antreten!
Greek, so just a few of you that understand Greek will be able to understand it. We're going to be translating in English very soon.
Σου είχαν πάρει όλα τα ρούχα, δεν είχες τίποτα. Μια αλλαξιά μόνο. Και κουβέρτες και τα πάντα. Και σου είχαν δώσει οι Γερμανοί κουβέρτες. Σου πεις έκανες σαν και αυτό το μαξιλάρι, τετράγωνο. Ένα πιάτο με μαγιέ και ένα κουτάλι. Αυτά έπρεπε να τα έχεις διπλωμένα και έμπαινε ο διοικητής και έκανε επισόρηση. Με ένα σκύλο, με ένα βούρδουλα τόσο χοντρό σύρμα και σκηνή. Αν ήταν να πάρει για εκτέλεση, το ξέραμε γιατί μας φέρνανε όταν πέρανε για εκτέλεση, μας φέρνανε τσάι με μαρμελάδα και μια φέτα ψωμί. Μας είχαν φέρει και μια γυναίκα στο στρατόπεδο, η οποία ήταν καυσεδίνα, Ζήνα, Φραγκαία, και εμείς την προσέχαμε.
Now this guy over there is your fellow prisoner. He's basically your guide.
Για τον αδερφό μου.
Because you have no voice in this
Ruhe. Wer nochmal spricht, wird bestraft.
All the data, all the information you have. It's all historical resources. The kitchen.
Πήρες είδηση το σημείωμα που μου έδωσε πριν μια γυναίκα στο θάλαμο? Είναι για τον αδερφό της, τον Τάσο. Τον έχουνε στο 15 και δεν μπορεί να τον δει. Λοιπόν, άκου να δεις τι θα κάνουμε. Όταν θα πάμε στο θάλαμο για το βραδινό συσίτιο και φτάσει η ώρα του Τάσου, θα σου κάνω νόημα. Εσύ θα χύσεις λίγη σούπα κάτω, δίθεν κατά λάθος. Ο σκοπός θα σου φωνάξει και εγώ θα βρω την ευκαιρία να δώσω το σημείωμα στον Τάσο. Εντάξει?
Weg, Mann, schnell! Los, raus! Los, los!
Ησυχία, μην κουνηθεί κανείς. Δες έξω από το παράθυρο τι γίνεται.
This is actually a newspaper of that time.
Κοίτα το κάθαρμα ο Κόβατς. Στέκεται με ανοιχτά τα πόδια και υποχρεώνει τους κρατούμενους να περνάνε από κάτω γονατιστή.
Ariana, you can stop this anytime. I just need to thank you all. There's much more for you to see, but let's have a discussion instead, not too much time for it anymore. Thank you very much.
So much, Agiati, for this fascinating presentation that really, I think, gave us a sense both of the value of the infrastructure, the bridge between local and global, all the complexities around creating something that brings together different expertise. So very, very, very interesting. But I'm sure we have probably comments and questions from the audiences, maybe both online and in person. So who wants to break the ice and start?
Hi, thank you very much for the presentation. I have to learn as a Greek. I didn't know about the block 15, so thank you twice. Have you thought of maybe make it available without the story, only just for someone to go in and see the building? I mean, without be part of the story.
No, is the short answer. But thank you for the comment. I just wanted to say that whenever I speak about Block 15 to Greek audiences, the first question I ask is who has heard of Block 15? Nobody has, or very few people have. So this was one of the particularities of the project, and I think that building project like that, it is very important, but also channeling the results through European infrastructure is even more important. Now, no, the short answer is no, and sorry for just replying that directly, because we're very proud of the interactive scenario. Now, if we feel or if we see that just a walk through the actual building would be valuable, then of course we can do it. If we had the time, the final part of the demo is when you, as a user, step out of the kitchens, walk towards the building, block 15, and then enter it. So you have a pretty good sense, but isolating it from the rest of the scenario could probably feel a bit awkward. And this brings me back to the user assessment I hinted at just before. Because block 15 is effectively a very narrow corridor with small isolation rooms on either side, we found that headset users found it a bit difficult or disorientating, because your eyes got the message that there's a wall over here, while your body didn't. So we were trying, to correct those things. So even within the scenario framework, this was a difficulty. So extricating it from the actual scenario may be even more difficult for perceptual reasons.
Just to make myself clear, it's not like the scenario is not good enough. It was great. It was so great that I was feeling very emotional listening to the voices, and that's why I asked, because I was ready to start crying, but thank God no one noticed. But I just let you know, if you see me, it was really good.
Thank you, thank you. But we don't want to make people cry. That's and
no, this is me. I cry all the time. So
no, I have to stress that we don't want to traumatize people or make people cry. This is the spirit I'm responding to you. It's to educate people, and create an impact, and also because I don't know about the UK, but in Greece, the way we get taught history, particularly, the 1940s, is not, very exciting, especially for younger demographics. This could be a new suggestion, of how to do things. It's a matter of translating your data, your resources, your archival collections into something easier to perceive and immerse yourself into. Thank you for your comment and your question.
Do you want to? Was that a hand raise? Sorry. Oh, okay. Michael is much better at this than me.
Hi, I just wanted to ask if it was an internal production or it was an external company?
No, it's an internal production. Everything has been, researched and developed by the Department of Informatics, Athens University of Economics and Business. No company involved.
Okay, and if you have talked about commercializing, but not in the economic way, but in a sort of the major games platform?
No, this is part of our agreement with the German Ministry of Foreign Affairs that it's going to be open and free to use. So basically, you will be able to download it on your own, Oculus, and just experience it yourself. It's just going to be free out there, and it is going to be available through some kind of a DARIAH channel. We'll have to see about that.
Yeah, sorry, I know it's free, but have you thought about putting it on a major game platform, even for free? I mean, like Steam or any other platform?
Not for now. Not for now. This is not on the table. Perhaps when it's completed, we'll see about that. But for now, this is not on the table.
Oh. Hi. You mentioned the use of recorded sound, so the kind of oral history and the digitized newspaper. What I was wondering is if any 3D digitized objects from archives or museums had been used.
No.
And is that because there weren't suitable objects to include in the narrative? Because you mentioned obviously the state that block 15 is in now, so I wasn't thinking so much of items that existed from the site, but I was just wondering whether there would be items in collections that would be similar enough that could be of interest to kind of scan in 3D and to include in this environment? I suppose I'm asking, I've got a bit of a vested interest. Where I work, we've invested in a 3D digitization rig, and we have been kind of scanning models, but it's my kind of dream. We've just been sharing them on Sketchfab, but part of my interest is how they could be used in kind of immersive environments like this. So I was just wondering if you'd done that, or whether you were considering doing that.
The short answer is no. It would be beyond our budget to 3D digitize objects, but besides that, and also, you know, there aren't any ready digitized items that we could use, but that would have been fantastic. I mean, really fantastic to incorporate such materials, such models into the production. But no, sorry.
That's okay. I just thought I'd ask because when you pointed out the newspaper in the window, and I did find that really interesting. But I think that's the way things are going in the future, if we can kind of digitize items in archives and museums and add them in these environments. But you're right, it does cost money, and the equipment's not cheap.
Yeah, and also I have to say that there's this this part in the production where there's a cigarette case packet. This was recreated from scratch. It's not a 3D digitized object either.
We have one question online, I heard. So could we first maybe give prominence to that? We don't see it. Can you? Yeah.
It's in the Q&A.
Yeah, oh yes, here it is.
So it's Simon Mahoney. Is that it?
Yes, that's
yeah. Well, hello to Simon, and thank you for. I mean, it must be pretty late in China right now. Looking forward to seeing you in Graz in a couple of weeks. So he's asking, are you able to make clear to the user what parts of the building or events are based on solid evidence and what are not, but interpreted in some way? Everything's based on solid evidence. All the testimonies and all the triggers are based on solid evidence. There's no such creative license or liberty at all. The actual mission, of course, is a fictional mission. This is not based on some kind of a testimony that somebody ever gave anyone a letter to her brother and the brother got it or not. But all the information you get during the production, all the data is are based on solid evidence, Simon. Yes.
Hooray, that's good, sorry. Thank you for that. That was really, really fascinating, Agiatis. And what I was thinking particular about was, you mentioned it very briefly, was the collaborations, and obviously not you mentioned it briefly, it's about not working in silos. And I was particularly interested when you mentioned the visual histories. I did some work many years ago with, it was called Dead Survivors of the Show, the Steven Spielberg Institute. And they had some real deep thinking about the ethics of some of the testimonies and how they would use them for different ways, because of the difficult heritage around about that. And you mentioned very briefly being in Jerusalem, I think it was, where you discussed some of these issues. It was interesting, your colleague saying to put it on Steam, and I immediately went, no, God, no, you couldn't, because it would be abused and disabused and taken out of context and misinformation. Before you know, it'd be in TikTok, and it would be wrong, it would be absolutely wrong. So what kind of, not controls, but obviously you want to make it available, but what other context are you going to put around about it so people can understand more and understand about the ethics of the 3D model? Or is that just like such a huge question?
Is there such a thing? Well, way before the project started, thanks for the question, this is a question that keeps coming back, as you understand. This whole issue of, once it gets immersive or once it gets 3D, then there's a problem. So back before the project started, which was 2020, I think it was end of 2019, just before COVID, I was at University of California, Berkeley, discussing a potential project, which was that one. And there was this professor of architecture back then. She was of Jewish descent. And she basically said to me, why do it? I mean, why actually inflict anyone, why, bring back this traumatic experience in such a powerful way? And the first thing that came to mind, which is not an answer to the question, but what I as very instinctively replied is, Schindler's List is very immersive. you don't just get immersed in, in 3D worlds. You can get immersed in literature, you can get immersed in cinema, you can get immersed in a work of art. I mean, I do. So are there ethics around it? So we are not creating a game that's based on the sources. We are actually reusing and repurposing the sources, and we're being very true to them. And I think this is the heart of the answer to the ethics. I mean, we're not mediating or reinterpreting. We're just, if it was a dish, we would be serving it on a different plate. That's the thing, but the food is there. I mean, so it's a very open-ended discussion. And at the ERI event in Jerusalem, again, it came back, because even with data sets, like when you create a new data set collection, it's all about storytelling, people say. You have to tell a story with your resources. And what happens when your resources are difficult in that sense? So it's a very long discussion, but yes, I hear you. We see this is the first, as I said, I didn't emphasize it as much. This is the first production of its kind in Greece, touching upon difficult heritage with such digital methods. I see it as an experiment. Let's see where that takes us. I have been teaching at the Athens University of Economics and Business, discussions around digital storytelling, and there were students, posing exactly the same questions. Why do that? It's a very long discussion. I mean, there are video games touching difficult issues, not difficult heritage issues, but say, there's a very famous video game called That Dragon Cancer, and it's about, a child with cancer, and the actual video game was developed by the father of the child. So there's a long discussion. And I think that could be an interesting discussion within infrastructures as well, because once you start going that way, you cannot go back. I mean, I'm pretty sure there are, see the communist concentration camp in Bulgaria, people have started thinking about new projects around difficult heritage. So I think infrastructures are a very good framework and can provide a good critical framework around the issue you brought up.
I have to tell you, I will be using it with my students to look at 3D modelling and what it means to do that and open up these discussions.
Yes, so by all means. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a really fascinating project. It strikes a chord with me. Some of my colleagues work on dark tourism and heritage, and particularly the role of prisons in that and prison visiting. And what struck me is that there are still so many different ways, although you want to be true to the sources, there are still so many different ways to interpret the evidence that we have left. And whereas some people focus on more of the horrific aspects and the terror. And I imagine actually creating that in an immersive environment is incredibly powerful. I mean, I know, as you say, you can do it on film, you can do it in various different ways, but because you're, immersed in that makes it stronger. But others sort of try and tell more kind of positive stories about, kind of triumphing over some of these things. And obviously you mentioned that the woman who's a survivor. I just wondered, did you consciously choose to foreground some of those stories as well to kind of balance the picture of people's survival and triumph over this difficult time? Or
yes and no. For one, firstly, let me say that it's called difficult heritage rather than dark heritage, because you don't really focus on the dark side of it, but you cannot ignore it. But it's the difficulty that you need to interpret. Mm-hmm. So one of the things we had to consider was how to portray violence and recreate violence. So violence is implicit, it's not explicit. As I said, we do not want to traumatize anyone. I mean, just, recreating the mothers, gathering on the north side of the fence, and just to see if their sons and daughters are still alive is just powerful enough. You don't need anything, you don't need really new ways of torture, and horrific kinds of torture were coined in that particular, in the courtyard actually of Block 15. We are not going to be showing that. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, it's I mean, the story, if I'm allowed to call it that, because it's not really a story, it's very human in a way. It's about, you know, a sister trying to get a message across to her brother. So of course it's very human and very human-centric. But no, it's not going to have a happy ending, because hardly ever did anyone have a happy, you know, get out untraumatized or even alive from that place. So it was a very, again, how many times did I use this word today? It's a difficult balance. But no, it's not going to be sort of it's uplifting, if you'd like.
Exactly. Yeah. And rightly so for historians. I think that's an important message to.
Yeah, it's not Schindler's List, which again, it's based on a real story, but we're doing something different here.
Okay, thank you.
I have a comment to that. So you obviously focused a lot on the links with the for obvious reason, the international infrastructures and so on, but you also made it quite clear that the local team was very well resourced and interdisciplinary and brought together different expertise. So I wonder if you could tell us a bit more about the importance of that national or local infrastructure you were embedded in. And maybe also if you could tell us something as coordinator of the project. I assume that you took care of a lot of those processes of collaboration. And I think, again, that's an element in infrastructure that sometimes we tend to leave behind or forget about it, that in actual fact is what enables some of these things to happen. So I wonder if you could tell us more about that.
Thank you, Arianna. Well, yes, infrastructures and projects are all about people. They are structures made of people for people. And the other thing that I always keep in mind is that digital humanities is inherently interdisciplinary. You cannot build a digital humanities project without employing different sorts of people with different, you know, cultural backgrounds, training backgrounds, you know, different levels of expertise. We have some very nice postgraduate projects, postgraduate dissertations coming out of Block 15 as well, and their insight is really interesting. So yes, it's all about multiplicity of voices, and I think this echoes back into the international or European infrastructures. It's all about different people working towards more or less the same goal, or same-minded people. We may be coming from different perspectives, different backgrounds, or the paths we've walked to reach that point. Each one of us in life is very different. I started off as an ancient historian down at the Strand doing pretty conventional humanities research, and look where I am right now. I mean, discussing, you know, digital data sets. That's crazy. I didn't even know how to use Word back then, Microsoft Word. So you have to be open to that. And as I said, our budget was quite limited. It was not negligible, but it was limited. So basically we had to pick, like, literally to hand pick the right people for the right job in that project. And I think this is the case with all digital humanities projects, because none of them, or very few of them, are really excessively funded. So this is another, and let me make one final comment on that, and thank you for bringing this up. I don't know how many of you in your universities here in the UK or Ireland have courses on DH project management. We don't in Greece, and this is another big topic that we need to start discussing. I mean, how do you teach people, you know, to build teams and, you know, carry out research, not just conceptualize, but actually deliver a project?